We will now be having the ANTC debate on the topic Managing Success or Failure, which is easier to manage. To chair the debate, I'd like to invite Dr. A.K. Mahapatra, Dr. Deepak Jha, Dr. R. Narang, and Dr. Samuel Kaba to take to the stage. To moderate the session, may I please invite Dr. Thomas Nakagawa.
Well, good day, everyone. My name is Tom Nakagawa. I am a pediatric intensive care specialist. I made the last comments in the last session, so maybe I'll give you an idea what you're in for. It is my pleasure to moderate this session, which is the distinguished debate that features two of our neurosurgeons, and we're going to be talking about which is better, or which is easier actually, to manage success or failure. Our speakers this morning are Dr. Chandra and Dr. Sabapathy, and we'll start with Dr. Sharma. We'll allow the presentations to move forward for both of these speakers. We can have a discussion after that, and then I'll offer a few closing thoughts.
Thank you very much, esteemed chairpersons, moderator. So before I came here, I just wanted to make sure whether I was just had a word of exchange with Professor Sabapathy, and I just said, is it about trauma or is it generally about life? And he said about life, so I felt a bit relieved because that is a pattern on which I have actually prepared this talk. Now honestly, I don't know why Deepak asked me to do this, because I don't consider myself as an epitome of success, or sometimes, you know, especially when I'm sitting in front of such stalwarts like Professor Mahapatra and others here, I don't know whether I'm actually the right person to speak. I'm still a learner on this path, and I just want to express my opinions over the past 2 decades. And honestly, I wanted to select managing failure because I had a lot of failures, but Deepak stuck to his grounds. He said you have to speak on success, managing success. So I thought, let me put some of my views, some of my slides together. Now, what is success? I mean, everybody can have the definition of success, but I personally feel that success is something which actually doesn't exist. You know, we have created as a fiction of our own imagination. It's like the center which comes into creation when you draw a circle. So the center doesn't exist, but because you draw the circle, there is a synergistic emergence of the center. And that center, just to have some kind of definition, because humans are naming animals, we call it as a success. So let's see what makes up the circumference, or what makes up the components of the circle. So there are so many components to it, but these are the few things I've added. You could find them a bit peculiar, and I will speak about it in no specific order. So first, let me speak about the Blue Ocean Strategy. So how many of you here have read this book? Could you raise your hands? Anybody who have read this book on Blue Ocean Strategy? So that's a good thing for me, because then I can speak about it. So it's a wonderful book, you know, you can read it. It was published in the year 2004. It fundamentally speaks about 2 oceans. A blue ocean, which is blue because there are no sharks in it. Red ocean, which is red because there are plenty of sharks and they're eating each other. And the whole ocean is filled with sharks. So what are these? So symbolically, red ocean indicates a subspecialty where there's lots of competition. Blue ocean is something where, you know, nobody else is there and you're creating the competition. Most of the people prefer to get into red ocean because, you know, that's an established place. So they are comfortable being eaten by other sharks rather than to go into blue ocean, because they say that this is my familiar area. People are generally hesitant to get into blue ocean. It does take a long time to establish in a red ocean. In blue ocean, you can establish yourself in a shorter time, but you have to understand that it's got its own set of challenges. A blue ocean could become a red ocean. For example, spine. 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, nobody was willing to go into spine, but nowadays it's a red ocean. A red ocean could become a blue ocean, like trauma. Most of the neurosurgeons, like the discussion here, they say that we don't want to do only trauma, we want to do something else, because they feel that doing trauma is something less for them. And when a red ocean becomes a blue ocean, there would be re-entry by other fish. So like Professor Mahapatra was suggesting, we can have an MS for traumatology, because most of the neurosurgeons are not keen to enter into the blue ocean. So you could create a new blue ocean by creating new techniques, or you have established surgeries and you could create new techniques, or you could create a new territory by creating a new subspecialty, new innovations, research, publications, or starting even a subspecialty at a new place. Now, whichever ocean you swim, it's very important. You could swim in whichever ocean you want, that's up to you. You need to have clarity and ease. What are the definitions of clarity and ease? There could be many definitions, but I really like this definition. This is a poetry book which is written by my daughter. It's available on Amazon. So clarity is not always clear blue skies and crystal waters that showcase the rich life content in them. It's not always a spotless plan to be executed for days to come. It's sometimes realizing that even here in this messiness and murkiness, you are free to rest. You're allowed to not know what lies at the end of the staircase and take it one step at a time. And what is ease? You could choose whatever you want as long as you feel easy about it. So easy it is to break open, fluid and free, to carve your own art and trust where it takes you. It's important to choose your easy. So you could enter into a red ocean, but be sure that it's easy for you. So you can decide whichever ocean you want to swim in. Both are okay as long as you feel it comes naturally to you. Let's come to the next thing, finding new cheese. What exactly is this new cheese? So how many have read this book, Who Moved My Cheese? Thank you, sir. So I can see that it's a much more commonly read book. So fundamentally it speaks about two people and two Lilliputians, So they come to a hypothetical cheese station, they eat their cheese, they come at 9 a.m., leave by 4 or 5 p.m., they gossip, they speak about politics, they have their cup of tea, they go around and then they go back home. It sounds very familiar. And soon they start thinking that this cheese will last forever. And what happens one day? The cheese runs out. So what is a behavior pattern of various people when the cheese runs out? So these two mice, Sniff and Scurry, they immediately move out into a search of new cheese. Harv stays for some time, is afraid, but ultimately he makes the change. And Hem stays back. He says, it's not fair. I'm going to come back every day. I'm going to write letters to the ministry. I'm going to do a strike. This cheese has to come back. It's my rightfulness that this cheese has to be there. And he continues staying in that same place. So this is the place where I began. You could call it as a maze. And definitely it's a red ocean. So when I was trying to swim in the red ocean, because there are already stalwarts, people who are giants, Professor Tandon, Professor A.K. Banerjee, Professor Mahapatra here, obviously you feel overwhelmed. So I decided I should do something different in order to create my own ecosystem of blue ocean. So I did this about close to 2 decades ago, developed an endoscopic carpal tunnel set. We published it, but we were unfortunately not able to we commercialized it, but by that time, the interest was lost. And how when he goes across the journey, he comes across bits of cheese in cheese station E, he eats it, he finds it delicious, and he thinks it would have been better if he would have come earlier. And he kind of gets these insights, which he writes it, so that Hem could come later on and see these insights and also trace back to the cheese. So having change, you are always afraid of the change, but when you undergo the change, you actually feel happy about it. This is another case study of a vertebral body hemangioma. So I operated a similar case close to 2 decades ago. We lost 5 liters of blood, posterior approach, anterior approach, and then we decided it's not the right way. And then we came across this technique of absolute alcohol injection, which costs only a couple of 10 to 20 rupees. So, and we published multiple papers on this. So Pankaj, who was my student at that time, wrote up this paper. Now he's a professor in my unit. So this is a very simple technique. So you could have, such ominous pathologies causing severe compression, and then you insert absolute alcohol. We have a follow-up of more than 15 years, and there is a complete cure of the patient. So just to show an example where we injected either pedicles or kitty needles and then connected absolute alcohol, it leads to instant embolization, and you can see there's absolutely no blood. And then we decompress, which is again totally avascular. And this is a child who was completely quadriplegic, and following after 3 months, the child was able to walk. So moving ahead, we developed a universal new technique for CV junction, DCER, which is now very widely used all over the country. We developed a universal CV junction reducer with Medtronics, and and we published a bunch of papers, at least 20 or 30 papers, and this technique is now followed all over the country. or not only over the country, over the world. You can see such severe BI, we could reduce it completely using this technique. We also developed new implants. And you can see with this universal reducer, you can lead to a complete reduction of very severe bacilli invagination and AAD. So the old cheese was a transoral excision, the new cheese is the technique of DCR. So Harm realized that when you move in a new direction, it helps you to find new cheese, and he continued moving. We described for the first time a technique of endoscopic hemispherotomy, and that's a child which I operated in Malaysia. We just lost 40 cc of blood. Child was having about 200 seizures a day. It became an established technique. We published number of papers into textbooks as well as Jerome Engel's textbook of epilepsy. We were fortunate enough to publish this paper in New England Journal of Medicine, which has more than 400 citations. That's the only paper from India from neurosciences to be published in NEGM. And we described finally these two techniques, endoscopic hemispherotomy and endoscopic corpus callosotomy and commissurotomy. We also described a robotic guided radiofrequency ablative disconnection for hematomas. So you could see this giant hematoma, practically inoperable. So using this technique, we did this, and this is a published work. And then finally, we described a bloodless technique for hemispherotomy, where we would, using a robotic trajectories, we would produce a hemispheric disconnection. We call it as a ROTCH, robotic thermocoagulative hemispherotomy, which came out in the cover page of JNS. And definitely I think it's a landmark, because I come from an era where we had a hole in the brain, and that was a maximally invasive surgery, and I was fortunate enough to be involved in this technique, where we have only a line in the brain. So Harm was afraid to explore new corridors, but he overcame his fear and plunged, and he continued going ahead. And he kind of got all this kind of beliefs which he wrote it down. It's safer to search in the maze than to remain in a cheeseless situation. Old beliefs do not lead to new cheese. We described a new pituitary retractor, and this is how we used it operating. And then finally, once in a lifetime, you do come across one of the darkest corridors. For me, the darkest corridor was to establish a center of excellence for epilepsy, heavily based on research, because that's something, which I was not totally aware of, and I was really afraid to go into it. But we worked very hard. We published more than 400 papers, and we operated over 3,000 epilepsy cases. So these are the new cheese that we were able to bring it forward and let others also taste. So what exactly is cheese? Cheese is a metaphor for what you want in life. It could be a job, a relationship, money, big house, freedom, health, recognition, spiritual peace, even an activity like running or cycling. Each of us have an idea of what cheese is, and we pursue it because we think that it genuinely makes us happy. And if we lose it, sometimes it could make us very unhappy. Sometimes the corridors are very dark, and sometimes they are very nice. So when they are dark, it really helps if you are there with family and friends, and I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of them, and they do help you out when you're navigating yourself through these dark corridors. Completing the circle, Red Queen syndrome. I don't know how many of you read this book called Homo Deus. Can you raise up your hands? It's an amazing book. It's a part 2 book of Homo sapiens written by Harari, and it shows where exactly humanity is proceeding and why exactly humans are much more superior than animals, because we have the shared imagination, shared trust and shared dreams to the extent that we can't even imagine. For instance, if you're paying somebody 100 rupees, it's because of the shared trust, because both of us inherently believe that it carries this value, which cannot be even imagined by other species. We have a shared trust. We sign an MOU. We think that everything, we buy a house, we shall sign a bunch of papers, we think that is what it is. Now, despite all these advances, despite all this successes we had, it created one loophole, which is called as a Red Queen syndrome. What does it actually mean? It means what Red Queen told in Alice in Wonderland. In our country, you have to run twice as fast as to stay where you are. So I think one of the fundamental problems for us is that we are not able to soak in the present. Forever in our minds, we are running forwards, and that inherently is something which doesn't lead us to taste the success. Now, if you look at papers which have been published recently on mindfulness, you have more than 20,000 articles coming up. It's coming in a big way in treatment of psychiatric illnesses. So mindfulness, or being aware of what is fundamentally of you being aware of the present moment. And it doesn't come so easily because we are always moving ahead in future. You know, we are doing surgery here, we are already at home, we are already writing a paper, we are already planning the surgery for the next day. So I think we need to retrain ourselves in mindfulness so that we can come back to the present and soak in the present. Failure quotient. What is failure quotient? Failure quotient is a measurement of somebody's ability to fail intelligently. Failure quotient is about failing intelligently. It's not about being able to use failure, it's about being able to use your failures to advance in life. The more you're able to do that, the higher your FQ is. A good example is Thomas Edison. We all know that he failed 1,000 times before he invented the bulb. So I think the success is created when you don't lose your enthusiasm in your repeated failures. You keep on moving forward. Perceptions. So I will read out this story. Some of you could tell me what this story is about. There was a son of a rich industrialist, slightly changed, the circumstances are slightly changed. There was a son of a rich industrialist, he was married to a beautiful lady. However, the second wife of his father threw him out of home. His father dies broken-hearted, heartbroken. He moves into a city, he works very hard. The king of the mafia in that city kidnaps his wife. However, he makes some good friends, finally rescues his wife, he starts a successful business venture, finally returns back to his home. His stepbrother is overjoyed to have him back, he finally takes over his father's empire. Can anybody tell what is this story about? Ramayana. Absolutely, you are absolutely right, sir. So if you look at some of the ideas we have, some of the avatars we have, they have been colossal failures. But the perceptions have been changed in such a way that we feel that there have been successes, there have been a huge quantum of success. For instance, once Karna tells to Krishna, he was being overwhelmed with self-pity. He says, look at you, you have always been lucky, look at me, I was born in such a humble family, I was abandoned by my mother, I never even had a blessings. I went through so many difficult things in my life, and you talk about, then Krishna says, that look at my life, I was born in a prison. I was adopted by somebody else. My own uncle tried to kill me, and I ultimately had to kill my own uncle. I couldn't ever marry the people whom I loved. I ended up marrying people whom I rescued from very evil people. So he says, success is your perception. If you think you're successful, you would be. Finally, I will end this with a circumference. You could create the circle, but unless you bind it with the circumference, you're not going to have this measure of what definition you call as success. And what is this circumference made of? To move from competition to collaboration, to move from volumes to value, to move from individuals to systems, to move from receiving to contribution. I think good Lord deliver us, to move from I to us. I think that's the fundamental tenet if you want to experience success. So success is ignoring the trees and seeing the forest, and managing success is a cycle of life. When people see successful people, they only see the front, they don't see what is behind. Because successful people don't look at trees, they look at the forest. And success, managing success, I think is a very essence of a cycle of life itself. So thank you very much, Deepak, for again this opportunity. I tried to put some of my thoughts. Some of my thoughts could have been out of box, they may not be very relevant, may not be understood, but I thought this is how I should proceed. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra, for an excellent presentation. And Dr. Chandra, I think, is the ideal person to speak on how to manage success. He has so many successes to his credit, and we meet him every day because we have a Cardio Neuro Center, Common Center, and he's such a humble person. Just meeting him, nobody would feel, the new person will not feel the kind of successes he has had. So he certainly knows how to manage a success, and that his successes have not affected him to get more successes. So that's why he has been getting, success after success. And so I would like to, if there are one or two comments or questions, somebody would like to? Or later, okay, later.
We'll take those afterward.
Okay.
Let's introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sabapathy, who's going to talk to us about failure.
I think it's a wonderful talk by Sarath as to how to manage success. I think when he started, he said he didn't know why he is there, but I am very sure why I am here. Because when Deepak told me, he said, I thought I should talk on success or failure. He said, I need an older fellow to speak about failure. He said, Sarath is very young and is doing very well. So, but to talk about failure, I need an old fellow with no hair. I think that's the reason, that's one reason I am here. And second thing is, as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Hand Surgery, Thomas, I'm a plastic surgeon. So I wrote an article, I wrote an editorial on managing failure. I think somehow it became very popular. I think Deepak has read it, probably in Google. So then he asked me, now, why did you talk about failure? So what I'm going to talk today is basically as a personal experience, because Deepak told me you need an old fellow to speak. So I thought I'll share a personal experience how I felt throughout the journey. So as Sarath defined success, I think failure is something you intend to have, you don't meet your objectives, and then you feel you have failed. I think that's what is fail. So when somebody talks about failure, writes about it, it's always saying how to avoid it. I think that's the way we take it and follow. So it is also very relative. I think what is very successful one fellow, I think somebody wants, as Sarath said, you really want there. Somebody doesn't really want to be there. Somebody is there. So what they achieve, they may say with what they achieved, they have felt very successful. Somebody, in spite of achieving high, they may still be, they may live in poverty. I think that's what. So it's actually, they could bias, and it depends upon the individual considering it. Okay, so that's so it's very difficult to define, and but obviously all of us understand it when we face it. I think that's true. So when you get into failure, how to managing it, failure, I think it's quite easy if you really follow some rules and somebody guides you. When you fail, you become desperate. And when you're desperate, you do some bad things and some of worse things, and it gets into disaster, and then it leads on to further failures. So in microsurgeon, I think it's easy to face so many failures. I think it's quite possible to say failure, and then I really want to put on this thing just to say how to. So if you could stop, and if you take those, you don't get into a disaster or desperation, then you get, first you do a damage control, and then you produce success. So I was working closely with Dr. Robert Ackland. Ackland was the person who really made those instruments for microsurgery. I think we wrote this book together in the end, where he made repairing vessels as smaller than 1 millimeter possible. And there is a video as to when you do this for trainees who could face failure. And I'll just try.
You get into difficulty learning this work. And sometimes you get into such difficulties that you'll get the paranoid feeling that the forces of evil are ranged against you on a personal and very deep level. And once that feeling gets a hold of you, you'll quickly go from difficulty to desperation and on to disaster, and the distance between those three is a very close one in microsurgery. Is when you get into difficulties, stop and think.
I think that's what it is. Suppose you want to manage failure, I think any time you get into a problem, I think what you need to do is to stop and think, and you should be very lucky, some mentor helps you to do that. I think that's what, that's at the time. So I had it very early in my life because it's going to be a personal story. I finished my general surgery postgraduate and applied for a service commission. I was first in the university, so as the first batch that was going for the selection, I thought I'll get a very good rank, and I went to the interview, and but the interview didn't go well. I think I really don't know who were there. Still, I do not know the persons who interviewed me. And one of them said that, don't you think that all bright people don't end up as good surgeons? He told me. I thought it was a very provocative comment. I just gave him back, stating that you can't generalize things. And I gave him a list of surgeons who are best working students who have done well. And he really became red-faced because I gave it in front of that. But then finally what happened was I didn't get selected, but I got the last rank. I got the 650th rank. I got so I was so angry. And I was angry at everything. And if I had given a pistol, I would have shot him. I was so angry. So at that time, one of the corridors I was walking, the vice principal of a college said, how are you? He asked, how are you? I said, madam, I'm not all right. Then he said, she was never taken by anxiety. I said, come to my room. Okay, then I told everything that happened. And then I think one of the most best days of my life was this. She said that you are very angry, and anger is a very powerful emotion, and you should use it very constructively. In this way, you are destroying yourself. He said, just bloody forget it. Anytime you hit a failure, she told me, anytime you hit a failure, you just have to work half an hour extra and go back and work. I think get lost, she told me. But I was able to get up, and she said these words, which I really remember, which I used it as a signpost for all my life, whenever I didn't get anything. He said, as life goes on, you will soon realize that what appears so important at a particular moment, with time you will soon find them become irrelevant. I think I chose a different life. I think service commission didn't make any matter at all. I think I didn't join service in the end. I joined service, left it. So I think it became totally irrelevant whether I was the 650th rank or the first rank. I think it didn't really make it. So I think that was I think so. This I used to apply it anytime I get into a problem. I think that was a very sage advice, but most important thing is when somebody advises you, I think you must be willing to take it. I think you must recognize that. But many times people advise you and then you don't really take it. So the best thing is both in microstrategy and life, stop and think and listen to the advice of the mentors. This is just not in big things of life, it's also in small things. I think you need to really work without remorse or anguish. And if you find that every fellow who has succeeded after getting a lot of failures, they'll all be, you'll have the common thread that is, they have stopped and thought and then get back. And when you talk about surgical failures, I think if you're managing failures, I think the easiest thing is to when you fail in surgery, I think in surgical technique. So I worked under a pediatric surgeon at Ravi. I think so I have never met any other person who is so good. A good person, a good surgeon, a good human being. I had done a surgery and then had a big problem. And then he said, I was in a formative phase of my life, and he said, when you encounter failure, you won't be the, he said, God will never bless you to be the first fellow to fail, he said. Like it's very rare, you can't have that honor. He said, you won't be the first person in the world to have had it. Many would have had it, and some would have come out of it well, and at least some more, a few would have written about it. He said, now go back and read the literature and read, and again, it's just basically it tells, you have to seek help. And one other thing which he told me, which I always take, is that if there is any surgery which you have not done in the last 6 months, you better before coming, you read and come. I think that's what all of us do. Then that's really means, you need to prepare to avoid failure. I think you need to really prepare well. And this is in Louisville, Kentucky, in the famous, most world-famous microsurgery lab. And Bob Ackland put this on. He said, preparation, the only shortcut you ever need to take. Actually, it looks very small, but actually it's engraved in rock, solid rock. So he told, I really wanted to get into the brain of all the fellows who come here, that, that as they enter into the lab, this is what is only I made it in rock. He said, you need to prepare, and that's the only shortcut you ever need to take. So the next thing that we have found useful, I have personally found useful, is that whenever you fail, you need to keep the memory of the failure very short. And that's very important. I think you really have to get going. So see, you have a 5-finger amputation you get. I think this is the first 5-finger successfully repaired in the country. It actually is extremely difficult to get all your 5 fingers cut separately. I think you always have to join. Very rarely you get an opportunity to do that. 17 hours you operate, because every finger you have to do it separately. So 17 hours you operate. So all of them you succeed, it's fantastic. That's fine. You are very happy, you have made this thing and all that. So you do very well. So here is another surgery where you have an 8-finger amputation. So we put it back, 2 teams you work, 18 hours you work, you put all the 8 fingers back, and suddenly one morning you find all 8 gone. And all 8 gone. So that's not due to a surgical fault, technical fault. I think there's so many things that this general body condition, the temperature, the fluid, there are so many things that could go on. So how do you feel? You put 8 hours you work, not that 1 or 2 survived. No, all 8 gone. All 8 gone. Suddenly you get. So what do we do? We think why it happened. Usually you find that it's not due to a single cause. It's a summation of many small compromises which could have been, which by each one of them is very minor. But then together they wreck the whole thing. So we then look out for the next opportunity to replan. But what we do when this happens is that the whole unit, we said the next opportunity, fastest way, we just do a replant and then succeed. So what we really want to do, we want to keep a memory of a problem in a very short. I think this is what happens in the Air Force too. He said some big crash happens and the pilot dies. I think the old, I think it's most squadrons practices, they have a habit that every pilot now, as soon as the news comes, they all go back, they take a flight and come back. So they really want to see that this memory of a shot is there, and sometimes they do this missing man formation. The head of the Air Force itself takes the flight on, and then so that they really want to keep the memory of a failure in a very, very short. Then next is having a good team helps to help you, and you need to surround yourself with people who are aligned in thought and culture with you. So I was working with Dr. Harold Kleinet, is #1 hand surgeon in the world who made it. And he said, how do you select your team? He said, when you select a fellow, I don't mind a monkey as long as he's an interested monkey. But then he said, no, but when you select a partner, when you select another professor, he said, no, you exercise a lot of thought. He said, it's just not the clinical or operative skills that matter, but also being acceptable to everybody in the unit. It's just not the person. I think they must be acceptable to the secretaries, to the physios, the other people, everybody that matters. So once you do that, then you have, when you have a failure, now you have a big team supporting you. I think what we have found in Ganga, I think when we select people, I think we look for a more culture fit than the mere skill fit. Because if you have a culture fit, you're happy working together. It's not working together. I think in every unit, every AIMS, any institution you take, all are working together. But are you all happy working together is what counts. If you're happy working together, then if you have a problem, then what really happens is all your attention is towards the problem. But if you're not happy working together, you are, what you are trying to do, you're addressing the case sheet, or you're addressing the director, you're addressing the other head of the department, but you're not addressing the patient. But then if you're happy working together, and I think whenever we found, when you're happy working together, we have found a lot of solutions to complicated problems and solutions to a major trauma. So otherwise, that's what, otherwise you all keep working on what will they think of me, the syndrome. And you should also be very careful that you don't fail on the way. That's very, when I came back from the United States, I was working with one Dr. Suman Sai, I think he's a legendary microsurgeon, he came from Taiwan. And he was there, he is so good. When I'm sure you all recognize the person in the right in the film, he's the Neil Armstrong, the man on the moon. But many of you may not know, Neil Armstrong had an amputation of his little finger, ring finger, in the ring aversion injury, and he was flown to be put it back by Suman Sai. So he came back to us in '97, 6 years after I came back, and he was always telling, then after the visit, he has got a very uncanny way of talking. He said, now I see that you will really be a successful fellow. But I am really, you need to remember, you must not do major mistakes in life, he said. So I asked Dr. Sai, what are the major mistakes in life so that I shouldn't fail? He said, first major mistake is never get addicted to anything, he said. That's the first mistake. The second said is that you're a good surgeon, you may be very successful, never have any affairs, he said. That's the next major mistake. And the third mistake, major mistake, he said is never invest thinking you'll always be earning like this. Okay, that's the third mistake. And in passing, he said the most important next is, you should have a regular medical checkup. I do all the first three, I'm very regular. I think the last one, I'm not at, many times I'm not very regular. The next goes on to institutional failure. So all of us run institutions, we all create institutions, and all of us have to realize that the place at the top is not, is the entire. I think all of you will know that each institution has got a big time, that that's the best time of the career, that everything is there. And the duration is now, and it's getting shorter and shorter. So I think that's what we have to do. So this time Bob Acklin came to visit us in 2006. And I don't know how will we read it. I think this is what he wrote in our visitors book. He said, I'm so happy to be here in your new United Nations of Microsurgical Progress and Education. He said, this feels the same in terms of energy and excitement as Louisville in the 70s, Ljubljana in the 80s. That's in Yugoslavia where Godina was there. My best wishes for a long continued success. All our registrars, they all became very happy. Sir, he has compared us to the best health centers of the world. I think all that. But I got very worried because he put one ticket for every place. Then during dinner time, I asked him, Bob, you put one ticket for, I told him, hey, we have to be very careful because you must not put Ganga of the 90s. Okay, you shouldn't put that. Then I asked him, why do you think, you put it on like, oh, that's true. I really thought you should catch the point, he said. He said, how do you fail? He said, there are three reasons why people fail. One is celebrating success. They all tell you you become good and then keep on asking how you succeeded. That's the first day you go, and you don't concentrate on your back home. Then he said you will train the world, but you should not take the care to train the people who take over from you. I think that's the second place you fail. The third thing he said, no, forgetting the core values which brought you up to the level in the first place. I think that was the main thing. So I think our first two, I think all of us will understand. I think that's not easy to make, but then at least know. But the last thing I really want to be very sure, and which I am very, very keen on enforcing in our place, is this hugging on to the core values which really brought you up. Attending to the patient, patient-centric, patient values and all that. I don't mind even if you are fanatic about it. No? So I think we have to be fanatic about it. The commonest mistake is explaining and accepting mistakes. I think with time, people see, if I tell them we work 10 years like this, then they say, sir, the times are changing, so you can't expect the same way to people to work. But then you may work in a different way, but then you can't change the way people work. That's explaining and accepting mistakes is there. And it all starts at the individual level with small compromises by a few people in the unit, which go unchecked. Not all these small out-of-order practices are not recognized by people abroad. The tragedy is that many choose to remain silent and allow this to happen. Once these small things happen, if you accept them, these operations in practice, they all add up. The system is dread upgrade. And if I think just he asked how many of you read this book? This is a nice book to read, because Kennedy wrote this before he became president. Okay, there he said the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a time of great moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. That's exactly what happens in our units too. So you know this fellow is making a mistake, but then many people will keep quiet. Okay, I don't think we need to keep quiet. I think we need to protest very hard. And none of us can be lookers on, critics on the sidelines. And all of us, we need to have to wait for occasions of great moral crisis, as Kennedy said, for exhibiting us. So I think what we need to do is that if someone does the first mistake, missing the routine post-operative rounds, or justifying unacceptable mistakes, I think there we have to do it. So when minor deviations occur, act fast, hit hard. I think that's the way you really know. That's the one you will pick. So in conclusion, I will say that failures are bound to occur. But then what really is important is that our response that counts. And at an individual level, I think what is really required is you need to really stop and think why it happened, and then correct it, then you stop on the job. And that's the way we stay on the right of job. But at the institutional level, I think what is the unwillingness of the leadership to correct small compromises, to grasp the opportunity to act, that allows a new norm to be set up. I think that's what is the mistake, and then allow the slide to start. At all times, we need people who will stand up to if the core values are kept low. So what really is important, each one of us can do that. And as Andrew Jackson said, one man's with courage makes a majority. And if you have such people, I think what really happens is that the institutions don't fail. And all of us will fail at some time or other. As our former president said, we cannot change events, but we can change our attitude and approach to the events. I think that's the way, if you do that, I think we'll fail, not fail. So thank you so much, Deepak, for the opportunity.
Any question? I will just tell one thing. I don't know how many of you know that Dr. Abdul Kalam wrote 40 books. One of the book he wrote, Fail means Fast Attempt in Learning. And Sachin Tendulkar says that when he got 0 out, he goes, when he makes century or double century, he goes and drink and attend party. When he was out and 0, that day he went and see that video 100 times. Because he says he learned more from 0 than the century. And he has highest number 0 in the world. He has a record of highest century and highest zeros. Do you know that? So success and failure are two sides. If we work enough, failure has to happen. So the fast attempt in learning. Now for you.
Great. Can you bring up my slides for me? I have 3 slides. Let's see if we can start here. Excellent. Great. So now we've heard 2 really outstanding talks, one about managing success, one about managing failures. So before I get to my closing comments, let's take a poll by show of hands. So how many of you think that managing failure is easier? Don't be shy. Okay, and how many of you think that managing success is easier? Okay, so.
I will ask you, what do you think?
Well, wait. Now, my third question is, how many of you don't know? Okay, all right, good. Okay, so what I want to do is spend a few minutes right now taking comments from the audience, talking about these two talks, success and failure. And I'm not asking you, if you want to, you can share your personal experiences with success and failure, but what I really want to do is hear from you. Tell me what you thought about these two talks, and then I'm going to spend about 5 minutes and close this out and kind of summarize everything that we've heard this morning.
My experience in front of Dr. Sharath is minuscule. I separated craniopagus conjoined twins in 2017 with Professor Mahapatra, and the only thing I can say, I gained a lot of success that period, but next 2 years for me were like hell. It was almost impossible for me to manage and even to survive at my workplace, personally, professionally, but somehow I managed. So I think managing success is extremely, extremely difficult.
You have hundreds of enemies.
Sir, from Sharat Chandra, sir, you said forest is more important, but I think Arjun was very successful, but he did see only the eye, he didn't see the, what to talk of forest, he didn't see the tree also. Your comment on that, sir.
Well, my perspective was not same as Arjuna. So my perspective was that when you get a failure, you kind of get really disheartened, and the mind has a very peculiar way of kind of highlighting your failures. You know, that's the human mind. It always highlights the things which you don't have. So when you have a failure, you always somehow keep on thinking about failure, even if you had 7 or 8, successes. So my whole idea was that when you have failures, have a holistic perspective. Look at the whole picture. So when you look at the whole picture, you will get a better way of judging the situation. That is what I was trying to convey.
Other comments? How about from our distinguished panel here?
Yeah, I want to make a couple of comments. Actually, this topic I feel is not just related only to neurosurgery or neurology, but it's a matter for life actually. Like Dr. Chandra, he quoted, he gave the example of Ramayana story, and somebody is talking about Arjuna, which is so Arjuna was the classical example that he faced difficulty, he faced that he thought it was failure that he has to fight, and as sir said just now that you stop, you think, and listen to a mentor. And Arjuna had a mentor, Lord Krishna was considered a god, so that's a great thing. So then that brought him out. So that I think is a very. The other thing is that one important point which I feel, and is in our meetings, we all have meetings, we all have group meetings, etc. So we should learn from failures which have occurred in the OT or in the labs, by even others, etc., not blaming them, but see what exactly has happened during the procedure, etc., why it led to a complication, why it led to failure. And so if we learn from that, we'll we'll not make the same mistakes ourselves. So most people learn from their own mistakes, but if you learn from others' mistake, one gets a little less of mistakes in future.
Comment down here. Yes.
Yeah, this is to Dr. Sabapati. That was a great talk, sir, actually, for all the young neurosurgeons especially. So, regarding failure, basically. We have a lot of failures in neurosurgery as such, and as medical professionals, as surgeons, our failure actually costs the patient's life. So it's not like other business things where you lose money or you get bankrupt and all stuff, but this actually leads to a patient's, we sometimes as such destroy their lifestyle or whatever. So in that case, actually as young surgeons, when we do it and something goes wrong, so handling that becomes more difficult than, yeah, it is a failure, maybe we'll think about it and then we'll try to rectify it in the upcoming further future surgeries. But actually, when you look at the patient's perspective, we have devastated his lifestyle. So how do we deal with that? So that is what actually, we see many surgeons, maybe senior surgeons have been more seeing some complications because they have operated a lot and then they know, okay, fine, that can happen. But for younger surgeons, probably that might not too much to take it up.
No, actually, you yourself answered your question in the sense, if you really stop and think, in microsurgery also we say that, here at least to a life and death, in microsurgery also, either it's either you 100% or 0%, no, it's there or not there. Okay, and one person who really knows where the problem happened is the person who operated, 100% of the time. Okay, he knows it, no. So you should really realize that. And then most important is to seek help, in the sense, next time you do it, no, you mustn't feel a little bit odd to keep on assisting. That's what I used to say many times that we want to do. In fact, when I went to Liverpool, I was working with Dr. Sai, the legendary person. So the first time, everybody wants to operate. So a complicated replant came, and everybody's cutting experience you want, no, you want. So it was my turn, and he said, no, it was a very difficult thing. He said, Raja, you go do. Then I just went back to him and told him, Dr. Sai, can I make a question? I said, yes, what's that? He said, can you please come and do? He said, why? He said, because everyone is jumping at the opportunity. There are so many Americans around. They all want to do, but I selected you to do it. He said, I just told him, sir, I came here to see how you do it. I'm sure when I go back, and I will be doing a lot of these. But I came here to do it. Can you please come and do it so that I want to see how you perform this complicated thing. So what you have to do is you just think, if you had a problem, you think who's the best chap in this cabinet who does it well. You just go there. And in fact, to give another example, I don't know for time. So when I started, there was a leprosy patient. We all have decompressed nerves, you know. The two young couple came, they said a love marriage, the hand is so important, otherwise just gone. I told him that's the reason why I should operate, okay. So there is impending paralysis was there, so I thought if I decompress, the paralysis will be down there. So I finished the surgery, it's a total paralysis. Oh my God, no, so it's exactly the situation what you face. Then I thought, now who is the best chap? One Dr. Janaka Palande was there. I just wrote to him stating, sir, I got a problem and I would like to see this. And I want to come with you, stay with you for a week. Okay, I just closed up everything and just went back and stayed with him. I told him what all the things I want to see. He's such a nice man. You know? So he had 2 cases of everything that I wanted to see in the 1 week. You know. So you just have to find who is the best person and the person who does it well, and then you should be humble enough to go back and then stay with him, be with them. I think that would be I think that I answered both the example and this thing.
Let's take these.
You have a question? See, successful people you see, they have gone through hundreds of failure. See, successful people who have not failure don't conclude that successful have no failure. So one question, who is asking question?
So,
yes.
So I just had a comment. I think we are going too focused on success versus failures. Indian mythology, the Bhagavad Gita clearly states that one should perform one's duty, don't think about the fruits of action. The moment you start thinking about the fruits of action, then you start counting successes, failures, and there is bound to be discontentment.
Naham karmani liptani, naham karma pharaspuha. I do not get indulged, I do everything sincerely. Do not get poisoned by work.
Yes.
Naham karma pharaspuha. Lord Bhagavad Gita may say, you should not have a result only oriented action. You work sincerely.
So that should be the dictum. So instead of concentrating on the success and failures, one should be balanced and live the moment. Thank you.
Good. I'm going to take one more. No comment? Okay.
One last comment. The question which he asked as far as the junior neurosurgeons are concerned, and sir answered that you need to change your approach to look at things, and for that you need to prepare your mind. He already said that you should look at it in a different way, but what to do for that? So as he said, there are many techniques in ancient Indian wisdom which help you to act on those lines and design your own protocols to prepare yourself. Otherwise you can have a very different kind of attitude to further career. Thank you.
So separating doer from the self is described in all mythology, all religions. So doer is different and self is different. Separating it is taught by all religions. So that is the, I think, key. And all the problems, we can find answers in our history, how our grandfathers did, how they handled the situation. So I think there lies the answer.
Okay, I'm going to close this out with a few comments, okay?
Very small.
Because we're running out of time, so I'm going to tell you that we could carry on this discussion for the next hour, but I look at this discussion really as which came first, the chicken or the egg? And if we look at this is really circular in my mind when we begin to look at this. And I'm not just talking about medicine. That's why I love the talk about this is life in general, because it's the life in general that shapes what we do in medicine. It is how we got to where we are today. So if we look closer at success and failure, I hope that I can convince you that you can't have one without the other. So to fail is a natural part of life. Now, that definition of failure is really not achieving a goal. That's just in very simple terms. Failure teaches us something. Every time we don't meet that goal, it teaches us something, and we need to be able to learn from that. And we learn from our failures because that's what helps us determine our success. If you never experience failure, then you can never progress. And if you don't progress, then how do you know that you were successful? And in fact, failure can be success in progress. I don't think we should look at failure as a negative because you fail in an attempt to get to that ultimate place where you succeed. Failure is not always a mistake, as you mentioned. We make mistakes every day. Some are more costly than others. Sometimes we make mistakes and we don't even understand how it affects people's lives. But it may simply be, at that particular point in time, that's the best that we could do with the resources that we have available. It's important to remember, though, that failure is a temporary situation, and that was exemplified in both of our talks today, and I think that that's really important. Success is temporary as well. Now, it can be permanent if we just decide that we're going to give up, crawl under a stone, and not do anything about it. If we just walk away and don't do anything about it, we can never achieve success. So when you struggle or when you fail, that's when you really learn what you're made of. Are you going to get up, dust off your boots, and say, I'm going to do better? Or are you going to sit there and wallow in your failure? That struggle or failure builds our character, and that can ultimately lead to our success. Now, I want you to think back, because most of us in this room now are no longer adolescents. We're no longer in grade school. When you were growing up, when you were playing sports, and you came in last place, did you get a trophy? No, you didn't. You were just in last place. And what did that do? It stimulated to either try harder or say, nah, I'm not cut out for this. I'm going to go do a different sport, right? Today, what happens? You get rewarded for being in last place. But how can you gain and how can you move to the next step if you never experience being in that last place? So the real mistake is really not capitalizing on our failure to learn and move forward from those events. You don't always get a trophy in life. You shouldn't always get a trophy in life. Failure is that opportunity for all of us to find new and creative ways to fix problems. So we put our failures in our heart, and we wear those experiences on our shoulder. And they really weigh on us. They hurt us. We hurt from our failures. They can consume our heart, but if we never find ways to move on, then you'll never achieve success. You'll never achieve greatness. Giving up is when failure becomes permanent. And it's been said that with experience, experience is our hardest teacher. Why? Because you get the test first, and then you learn the lesson afterwards. And that's actually very true. Most of the time we learn and then we take the test. The important message is learning from our experiences so that we can become more successful. Because many of our greatest experiences are based on previous failures, and yes, sometimes even our previous successes, but there's no guarantee. Failures and successes are the experience that shape who we are and who have brought us to this point in our life. And as far as success goes, success is never guaranteed. We put on our, when we're successful, we put in our pocket, we pat ourselves on the back, and then we move on. But you can't let those successes go to your head. And that was exemplified in the talks, and that's important. Winston Churchill said, success is not final, failure is not fatal, it's the courage to continue that counts. Success comes at a cost. And we all know that. We have trained to be the best in our fields, and that success has come at a cost. Cost of our families, cost of our time, loss of time with families and friends. The cost is previous failures as well that have really taught us our greatest lessons. So failure is the operative cost of success. They go hand in hand. Every one of us in this room is a leader. Jack Welch said that before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. And we've seen that. That's what we do. We consider ourselves successful. We grew ourselves. But when you become a leader, success is all about growing others. And that's where we become mentors. And that's where the true success lies, not just in medicine, but in everything we do. So my final thoughts for all of you today is that success is not measured in the lives we save, but it's measured in the lives that we touch. And that can be survival, and it can be in death. We do this through our mission to help others who fail, and we help them to achieve success. Because we have failed, we can now help somebody succeed because we have succeeded. Because if we never fail, we can never grow and become successful. So you can't have one without the other. The last quote that I'll leave you with, and I love quotes because they tell a story very quickly, is failure should be our teacher, not our undertaker. It is delay, not defeat. It is a temporary detour, not a dead-end street. To both of our speakers, thank you very much for 2 fantastic talks. Our panel, thank you very much. Dr. Sapa, yeah. So I understand you didn't hit goal number 3, which is like, or the 4th goal, right? Going to your doctor? Yeah, you didn't prepare yourself, but I understand tomorrow's your birthday, is that correct? Well, fantastic, so you had to do something to at least get this far then, right? So congratulations and happy birthday to you. Thank you all very much.